You were never meant to hear this story. They buried her body still warm to the touch, skin soft, breath faint, but unmistakably alive. And yet when the coroner opened her chest 3 nights later, there were no organs left inside, no heart, no lungs, no liver, just a hollow cavity that had never been cut. No incision, no blood, no damage to the skin, just a perfect, unbroken vessel of flesh that once held a girl named Eliza Montgomery. I need you to understand something. This isn't just a horror story from the Alabama backwoods. This is a rupture in the fabric of truth. A moment so disturbing that 3 trained physicians refused to document it. A girl melting from within, organs vanishing, and a town that decided silence was safer than answers. What you're about to hear is not just forbidden history. It's the blueprint for something older, something that preys not on the body, but the belief that the body is all we are. Because what happened to Eliza didn't start in that bed. It started centuries before, and it's still happening. In the summer of 1854, I was summoned to the Montgomery plantation as a consulting physician. What I found was not a girl in need of healing, but a sacrament already in progress, a ritual made flesh, and I have spent every year since trying to forget what I saw. But forgetfulness is a privilege I was not granted. So I've decided to tell it all. And I warn you, this knowledge is not safe. It is not comforting. It does not end with explanations that fit neatly inside science, faith, or folklore. The truth is rot wearing a mask, and if you stay with me, you will no longer be the man you are now. Now take a deep breath and remember this moment, because after what you're about to hear, there is no going back. And it all began when Eliza whispered from her bed, "Doctor, I can feel them slipping, one by one. But I'm still here. I'm still breathing. And I know something's watching me from under the floor." The first thing that struck me about the Montgomery estate wasn't the house. It was the silence. Not a bird, not a breeze. Just that southern kind of stillness that feels more like pressure than peace. Like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting, judging. The old man who opened the door for me had cataract eyes and scars I didn't ask about. But his voice stayed with me. "You the one they called?" he said. "Not doctor, not sir. Just the one they called, like I had been summoned, not requested, like this house had chosen me. Inside, everything was too clean, too polished, but it couldn't hide the smell. Not rot, not sickness. Something deeper, like burning herbs over spoiled meat, like the scent of something pretending not to be dead. Dr. William Thatcher, my colleague and the one who sent for me, was waiting in the study. He didn't rise when I entered. He just looked at me like a man who'd been watching something crawl out of his own skin. "James," he said, "she's not sick. She's unraveling." He poured us both a drink. His hands trembled so badly that half the whiskey spilled across the desk. He didn't clean it, just stared at it, like he was watching it melt too. "She was whole when this began," he muttered. "Now, it's like something inside her is choosing which parts to keep and which to discard." I told him what any rational man would, that no body liquefies while the brain remains alert, that this had to be hysteria or an unrecorded infection. Thatcher just laughed. A dry, cracked thing. "You'll see." Then he leaned close, lowered his voice, and said the one sentence that changed everything for me. "They say she touched something she wasn't supposed to. In the water." At first I thought he meant fever delirium. But the look in his eyes, it wasn't fear, it was reverence, like a priest whispering the name of a god he no longer worships, but still obeys. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a patient. This was a threshold, and I had just crossed it. He led me through the east wing like a mourner guiding someone to a crypt. Every step deeper into that corridor, the air changed. It got heavier, not with heat but with presence, like the walls themselves remembered screams they weren't allowed to echo. The servant woman outside Eliza's room stood like a statue carved from grief. Her name was Martha, 50 years old, eyes like wet stone. She didn't flinch when we approached, just looked past us, as if she already knew we'd fail. "Miss Caroline is with her," she said, and the girl said no more touching, not ever again. Inside the room, no light, just drawn curtains, thick shadows, and a smell that felt like it was crawling down your throat. Lavender to cover the real scent, and something else burning in a clay dish on the floor. Wormwood, maybe, or ash from something that used to be alive. Eliza's mother was kneeling beside the bed, once regal, now broken, her hair unkempt, dress wrinkled, but her eyes, sharp, suspicious, wounded, not from grief, from watching people pretend they cared while doing nothing to help. "You've come to fix her," she said, not as a question, as a dare. "I've come to understand," I replied, because by then even I knew this wasn't a case to cure, it was a cipher to decipher. She moved aside, and I saw Eliza Montgomery for the first time, and what I saw didn't fit any category. She looked asleep, but her body wasn't solid, not anymore. Her limbs had melted into the sheets, her stomach shimmered like glass in places, and through her skin, I swear to you, I saw things shifting, not like organs, but shapes, blurring and separating, as if her insides were choosing new forms in real time. When she opened her eyes, they were clear, alert. She looked at me and said, "Are you here to help me, or harvest what's left?" I couldn't answer, because in that moment, I wasn't sure I was looking at a girl anymore. And something in me whispered, "She's not the only one in this room watching." I sat beside her, careful not to touch the bed. The fabric looked like it might dissolve if I breathed too close, but Eliza, she stared straight into me, not with desperation, with recognition, as if she already knew I'd come, as if I had no choice in the matter. "Do you feel it too, Doctor?" she asked. Her voice was soft but steady, like someone speaking from beneath deep water. "Feel what?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "That something is listening. Through the walls." I wanted to believe she was delirious, that this was just fever dreams and suffering, but her lucidity was unshakable. She spoke with clarity, chronology, precision. "It started after the creek," she said. "We were picking wild violets, and I saw light beneath the water." "What kind of light?" "Like the moon, but alive." I touched it. It felt like it knew I was there. A chill ran up my spine. She hadn't mentioned pain. She had said it felt alive. Then she said something I didn't write down for years, because I was afraid just repeating it would summon it back, she said. "I think it needed something from me. Something inside. So it took what it wanted first." I looked at her arms, veins barely visible, skin pale, thinned, stretched, and I remembered what Thatcher told me, that her organs were vanishing without damage, no blood, no trauma, just gone. "Does it hurt?" I asked. "Not when it takes," she whispered. "It only hurts when it pauses, like it's waiting to see if I'll give the rest willingly." My throat dried, not from fear, but from the realization that this wasn't a disease, it was a transaction. Something was being traded, piece by piece, flesh for knowledge, organs for insight, and the worst part, she was beginning to understand it. "Promise me something, Doctor," she said. "If I start speaking in a voice that isn't mine, don't listen." I frowned. What would I hear? She turned her head slowly toward the ceiling and said, "Not what?" "Who?" And I swear to you, at that exact moment, the chandelier above us swayed, and nothing, absolutely nothing, had touched it. That night I couldn't sleep. The Montgomery estate creaked like a ship adrift in deep water. No wind, no waves, just the sound of old bones shifting quietly beneath floorboards. I lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to stop thinking about Eliza's words. If I start speaking in a voice that isn't mine, don't listen. But listen to what? And from where? Sometime after midnight, I heard it. A low thud, then another. From the east wing, I rose slowly, hesitating at first, but something in me, call it instinct or the pull of the forbidden, guided me forward. The hallway was darker than before, colder, as if the house had inhaled and never exhaled, and when I turned the corner toward Eliza's room, I saw something that didn't belong. A line of black water trailing from beneath her door, thick, slow-moving, but shimmering faintly with tiny silver pulses, like it was alive, like it had purpose. I bent down to examine it, and it recoiled, not randomly, not like spilled liquid. It withdrew, as if aware of me, and that's when the whisper started. Not from the room, not from the hall, from beneath the floor. It said nothing I understood, but the cadence, the rhythm. It wasn't madness. It was language, something ancient and hungry. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, Eliza was sitting up, for the first time. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the far wall, at something I couldn't see. "Eliza?" I whispered. She didn't blink, didn't move. She just said, "It's learning how to wear me." My breath caught, not from fear, from recognition, because I'd seen it once before, in a small village near Cairo, a girl who started speaking fluent Greek in her sleep. She died with both eyes open and pupils shaped like vertical slits. I'd buried that memory, but now it was clawing back. "Eliza, do you know what's happening to you?" She turned toward me then, not her head, just her eyes, and smiled. "I'm not the first," she said, "and I won't be the last." Then she laid back and began humming a tune I've never heard again, but can still remember every note, and the chandelier began to spin. At dawn I confronted Thatcher. We stood outside beneath the choking Alabama sun, cicadas screaming in the trees like tiny demons confessing their sins. The Montgomery fields were empty, the house behind us too still. Even nature seemed to retreat from what lingered inside those walls. I told him everything I'd seen. The black water, the whispering, the chandelier turning by unseen hands. He didn't act surprised, didn't even flinch. He just lit a cigarette with trembling fingers and said, "Then you've seen it too." I grabbed his arm. "What is it, William?" He didn't answer, not directly, just stared out toward the distant tree line, eyes unfocused. "There are places in the world," he said, "where the veil is thin, where things bleed through, and some bodies, some souls, are born too close to that veil. Eliza's one of them. They always find them eventually." I asked who they were. He shook his head slowly, not in refusal, but in defeat. Not ghosts, not demons, not illness. Think of them like scavengers of structure. They don't want to destroy you. They want to wear you, to study what it feels like to be you. It sounded mad. It felt true. I asked about the creek. He nodded. Weeping Creek isn't just a name. It's a warning. That water's been cursed since the Choctaw days. The locals won't even fish near it. Too many vanishings. Too many strange births. He lowered his voice. 4 years ago, a boy touched that same light Eliza described. He died within a month, but not before his eyes turned black. Not his pupils, all of them. He started writing pages of symbols no one could translate, pages that bled through the paper even without ink. My blood ran cold because I had seen those symbols, etched faintly into the window glass of Eliza's room, barely visible, but arranged with intention. "Why didn't you warn me?" I demanded. He exhaled smoke through his nose. "Because I thought I'd imagined it. Because it's easier to believe in infection than infiltration." He dropped the cigarette and crushed it underfoot, then turned to me. "You came here to save a girl, James. But what if she's already gone? What if what's lying in that bed now is just the invitation?" I returned to her room that evening, not as a physician, but as a man trying to look behind the curtain of the world. The herbs were gone, the curtains still drawn, but the air had changed again. Heavier, wetter. The scent was no longer just decay. It had sweetness to it now, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. Eliza lay still, eyes closed, lips slightly parted. But the moment I crossed the threshold, she spoke. "I dreamed of you, Doctor, but you weren't wearing your skin." I froze, because I hadn't made a sound when I entered. She couldn't have known I was there. But she did. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm. "What do you mean, Eliza?" She opened her eyes, slow and deliberate. They were wrong, still blue, still clear, but deep now, like looking through glass into a place that had no flaw. "You had no mouth in the dream," she said. "Just teeth. And they weren't yours." I tried to ground myself, focus on symptoms, structure. But her body wasn't following any progression I could map. Her shoulders had flattened, her arms too long now for her torso, and her breathing came in steady patterns, like clockwork, too perfect for someone so deformed. "Eliza," I asked, "when you touched that light in the water, did you feel anything leave you?" She paused, then smiled. "That's the trick, Doctor. It doesn't take anything. It shows you what was already missing." I felt a tremor pass through the floorboards, not from her, from beneath her, and then she whispered something I still regret hearing. It wasn't English, it wasn't Latin, but it was language, and when she spoke it, my teeth ached, my vision blurred for a moment, and in that flicker of disorientation, I saw her body shift. Not melt, shift. For just a heartbeat, I saw another face flicker beneath her own, a second silhouette, smiling beneath her skin. Then it was gone. I stumbled back, breath short. She giggled. A dry, childish sound. "You know what the worst part is?" she said. "It doesn't even want to hide anymore. It wants to be seen." That's when I knew this wasn't about illness. It was about permission. And someone, or something, had been given it. I left the room and went straight to the judge. Hiram Montgomery was not a man who feared many things, but when I told him what I'd seen, not just Eliza's transformation, but the shifting beneath her skin, his face changed, not with surprise, with recognition. He didn't deny it, didn't demand proof. He simply poured a drink, downed it in one swallow, and sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, "My father warned me this land was borrowed, not owned. He said some ground is only still because it's watching you." I leaned forward. "What happened at the creek?" He didn't look at me when he spoke. "She was never supposed to go near it. That water's been sealed for generations. There's something in it. Not alive, not dead. It doesn't move like us. It waits." I asked why he hadn't told the doctors, why he let men come and go, blind to what they were touching. His hands clenched the arms of his chair. "Because I thought I could manage it. Because men like me think we can control anything, even the ancient." Then he looked me dead in the eyes and asked, "Do you know what it's like to hear your daughter cry out in a voice that isn't hers? To hear your dead wife's lullaby come from her mouth, even though your wife's been buried 6 years?" I had no words. He continued, "Whatever is inside her, it doesn't just feed. It mimics, it studies, it knows things it shouldn't. It told me about my brother's death in detail, things I never told anyone. He stood slowly and opened a drawer. Inside was a journal. Black leather. Pages torn, smudged, and soaked in something dark at the edges. He handed it to me. She's been writing in this at night, but she doesn't remember, and none of us can read the words. I flipped through the pages. Symbols, strange patterns, geometry twisted in on itself, and in the center of one page, a drawing, a woman's face, split open from the chin, and inside, not bone, but hundreds of tiny eyes. That's when I realized she wasn't just melting. She was becoming something else, and something else was becoming her. Back in my quarters, I studied the journal for hours. At first, the symbols meant nothing, but the longer I stared, the more they started to pulse. Not literally, not movement, but rhythm. Like something in the back of my skull began beating in time with them. It was then I remembered something I read years ago, a banned manuscript from the Baltic region. Folk records claiming that certain signs don't just convey meaning, they carry it. That if drawn by a hand that has touched the outer hush, the glyphs themselves become containers, not of ink, but of intention. I traced one of Eliza's drawings onto fresh paper, and I swear to you, the candle beside me flickered out. No breeze, no motion, just sudden darkness. And in that silence, I heard it again, the humming. Eliza's lullaby, but slower now, deeper, and coming not from outside the room, but from within the pages. I threw the journal aside, heart racing, hands shaking, and yet I felt no fear, only recognition, because something deep inside me had heard that tune before, not in this life, but in some life, a memory embedded in the bone. That's when I began to question the true nature of Eliza's condition. Not a possession, not a curse, but a reclamation. What if she wasn't the victim? What if she was the vessel? Chosen not by chance, but by blood. What if her lineage had been marked centuries ago, long before this plantation, before this country, by forces that don't see time as we do? Forces that breed through patience, through generations, until the right vessel finally opens. That night, I dreamed. In the dream, Eliza stood in a pool of ink, her skin peeling away in gentle folds, and beneath, not muscle, not bone, but moving script, words forming her veins, symbols shaping her thoughts. She spoke a phrase, 3 syllables, not of any known language, but I woke saying them aloud, and my breath turned to frost. Now listen closely if you've made it. This far, you are no longer just a viewer. You are part of the pattern. To lock it in, to show the watchers that you're awake, comment this phrase twice below. Weeping Creek remembers. That phrase is not just engagement, it is declaration. It tells the unseen that you see, and it changes everything from here on out. The next morning I went to Martha, the servant who'd been with the Montgomery family the longest. If anyone knew the truth buried in these walls, it was her. She didn't invite me in. She didn't speak at first, just stared at me like she was deciding whether I was already lost. Then she whispered, "You've seen the signs, haven't you?" I nodded. She pulled something from a drawer, a folded cloth, stained dark brown with age. Inside it, a necklace, a crude pendant made from what looked like petrified root and teeth. 6 human teeth arranged in a circle. In the center, carved with something so precise it looked machined. "That was Eliza's great-grandmother's," Martha said. "She was born during the comet of 1770. They said the midwife ran screaming when she saw the afterbirth. It had a mouth." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Not literally, but something inside my perception cracked. The idea that this was new, that it started with Eliza, was gone. This had lineage. "This thing," Martha whispered. "It don't come from sickness. It don't come from sin, it's called. And once it answers, it don't leave." I asked why the family stayed, why the judge didn't flee. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He can't leave. None of them can. This land's not cursed. It's anchored, and their blood is the chain." I studied the necklace, its pattern, its weight. It wasn't decoration. It was a warning, a lock. "Did Eliza wear this?" I asked. Martha shook her head. "She buried it, right before the picnic at Weeping Creek. Said she didn't need it anymore. Said she wanted to feel free." That's when I understood. Eliza didn't get pulled in by accident. She invited it, whether she knew what it meant or not. She took off the lock, and whatever had been waiting beneath that water had been waiting a long time. I left Martha's quarters dizzy, and when I looked out at the tree line near the creek, I could swear the shadows between the trunks were watching. Not random, not shapes, eyes. And they were getting closer. I returned to Eliza's room in the late hours, drawn by instinct more than reason. There was no sound, no breath, no rustle of sheets. Just the quiet that comes when something chooses not to move. Not because it's still, but because it's waiting for you to make the first mistake. She was awake, but not looking at me. Her head was turned toward the far wall again, that same blank spot she always stared at, as if it was a window only she could see through. "Eliza," I said, "I need to know what it told you." She didn't answer right away, then finally, in a voice not quite hers, "You mean before or after the bones disappeared?" I stepped closer, careful, measured. Her chest rose and fell with inhuman rhythm. Not breath, but metronome. I could see the outline of ribs, but they were wrong, too smooth, too curved, like they'd softened and reshaped themselves into something else. "Eliza," I said, "what's still inside you?" She smiled without teeth. "The question isn't what's inside me, Doctor. It's what's using me to look out." I froze, because her voice, it doubled. There was a second tone layered beneath it, deeper, older, malevolent, but calm, like something imitating patience. "Eliza, if you can hear me," I said, "you have to fight this. Push it out." She blinked slowly, and then whispered. "I tried. I asked it to stop, but it said, 'We made a covenant.'" "What covenant?" Her gaze shifted toward the journal, still lying on the desk. "The symbols. They're not just writing. They're doors. I didn't draw them. I remembered them." My breath caught. From where? From before. Before what? She just shook her head slowly. "You keep thinking this is about me, but it's about what I opened. You can't treat it, you can't fight it. The best you can do is not answer when it calls your name." Then she said something that froze me to my core. "It's almost done building my replacement." "What replacement?" I asked. "But," she just smiled again, and her face flickered. For less than a second, her features shifted, not to another human, but to a form I cannot fully describe, not monstrous, not grotesque, but divine in all the wrong ways. I fled the room in silence. Not from cowardice, but from something far older than fear, something primal, something ancestral. That flicker in Eliza's face, that form behind her form, wasn't evil. It was worse. It was indifferent, like it didn't care whether it wore her or consumed her, only that it entered. I found Thatcher pacing in the study. His shirt was soaked through, eyes bloodshot. But when I told him what I'd just seen, he didn't ask, "What?" He asked, "How long was she looking at you?" That's when I knew. He'd seen it too, and more than once. "She's not Eliza anymore," I whispered. He nodded, defeated. "She's not gone either. They're both inside, like layers of wet skin. I asked if we could sedate her, burn the journal, seal the room, but Thatcher looked at me like a man who already knew the ending. James, this thing doesn't live in her. It learned through her. The body is just its classroom. The symbols were never written by her. They were written for us. And I remembered the first thing she ever said to me. Have you come to save me, or to study me? We thought we were the observers, but we were the subjects. From the moment I opened that door, Thatcher opened the bottom drawer of his desk, pulled out an old box. Inside was a letter, yellowed and sealed with wax, bearing the Montgomery family crest. The handwriting matched a page in Eliza's journal, but the letter was dated 1811. 38 years before Eliza was born. We opened it. Inside, a single sentence. The first vessel will suffer. The second will ascend. The third will call. No explanation, no context, just prophecy, and below it, a sketch of the same symbol I had traced, the one that killed the candlelight. Do you understand what this means? Thatcher asked. I nodded slowly. This wasn't about Eliza. It wasn't about illness. It wasn't even about the land. This was a ritual, a generational relay, each girl a step in a desire, and far older than memory, and we, the doctors, were nothing more than witnesses required to make it real. We decided to go to the creek, not out of bravery, out of necessity, because if what was inside Eliza came from that water, then we had to see it ourselves, or at least try to understand what had come through. Martha warned us before we left. Whatever you do, don't speak near it. Don't let it hear your voice. She handed us 2 small pouches, dried sage, rock salt, and something black I didn't recognize. Keep these in your pocket, she said. They won't stop it, but they'll make you harder to notice. That alone told me we weren't going to a place. We were going into a system. We followed the old slave trail past the tree line, down through thick undergrowth, where the birds stopped singing and the air turned electric. The ground felt soft, not muddy, but unstable, like it could shift and decide you were never there. Then we saw it, Weeping Creek, a narrow bend in the land. Water so still, it looked like a mirror, but not of the sky. It reflected nothing, just a void, a surface that drank light instead of reflecting it. Thatcher leaned forward, mesmerized. Do you hear that? I did. A low hum. Not from the water, from inside my head. It wasn't a sound. It was a tension. The creek was aware of us. I threw a rock in. It didn't splash. It vanished, like it was swallowed without trace. And then we saw the light. Same as Eliza described, just beneath the surface, pulsing, white-blue, moving without ripples, like something was pressing upward from below. Testing the barrier, Thatcher stepped forward, too far. The pouch Martha gave him fell from his coat. Immediately the humming grew louder. He dropped to his knees, eyes rolling back, whispering words I didn't understand. I grabbed him, pulled him back. The moment we crossed the tree line again, he collapsed, gasping. I saw it, he whispered. What did you see? He looked at me with pure horror and said, It saw me back. That was the moment I knew. We hadn't gone to investigate a mystery. We had just walked into its mouth. Thatcher didn't speak for hours. He sat in the study, staring at the floor, muttering fragments, not full words, just syllables that looped and curled in on themselves like the glyphs in Eliza's journal. I poured him a drink, put the pouch of herbs back into his coat, and asked the question I'd been avoiding since Willow Creek first swallowed me whole. William, what if this thing didn't choose Eliza? He looked up, hollow, and answered, It didn't. I frowned. What do you mean? He leaned forward slowly, voice low, measured, scared. It didn't choose Eliza. She called it. I felt the room shift, a breathless moment where the air felt suddenly too thick to inhale. She didn't know what she was doing, he continued. But it was deliberate. Her bloodline is older than Montgomery Pride. There's something on her mother's side, a lineage that goes back to the Appalachian root cults, the ones who never wrote anything down, because they knew the danger wasn't in what was said, but in what was heard. He stood, went to the fireplace, and pulled a scorched book from behind the woodpile. Inside were pages that had been half burned, but what remained made my skin crawl. Ritual diagrams, hand-drawn, Eliza's handwriting, but impossibly aged, as if they'd been copied from something ancient, then passed down, not for understanding, but for activation. He pointed to one sketch, a circle with 3 figures inside, one bent backward, one kneeling, one with no face. Beneath it, the third must open the mouth. "I think Eliza is the third," Thatcher whispered. Her great-grandmother started the chain, her mother continued it, and Eliza... He trailed off. I flipped the next page and froze. It was a drawing of me. Crude, yes, but accurate. My coat, my face, my initials written beneath in looping script, James Barrett. The witness, I dropped the book, my hands shaking. "Why me?" Thatcher didn't blink. "Because it needs an outs. Ida to tell the story, that's how it spreads." I backed away, heart pounding, because in that moment I wasn't afraid of Eliza, or the thing inside her. I was afraid that this script, this record, this very act of speaking it aloud was part of the ritual itself. I wanted to run. Every rational instinct screamed for me to leave Willow Creek, to abandon the plantation, burn the journal, forget Eliza's name. But I couldn't, because the deeper truth had settled in me now, like sediment at the bottom of a still pond. This wasn't a sickness, not even a haunting. It was a design, a system of exchange, not flesh for flesh, but memory for entry, identity for access, and I'd been made a part of it, not by force, but by attention, by witnessing. That's the mechanism no one warns you about in medical school. The moment you see something forbidden, truly see it. It sees you back, and then it waits. Thatcher stayed behind that night. I returned to Eliza's room. She was humming again, but the song had changed, slower now, reverent, like a funeral march for something still breathing. I stood in the doorway and said her name. Eliza. She opened her eyes. Bright, calm, not sad anymore, not frightened, just prepared. "You've seen it," she whispered. I nodded. I saw the creek and the light beneath it. She smiled faintly. "I used to think it was a lie. All the stories, the warnings, the whispers from the old women who wouldn't look me in the eye, but they weren't afraid of me. They were afraid for me." I approached slowly. The air felt tighter the closer I got, like the walls were closing in behind me. "Eliza, I need to know," I said. "What is it building inside you?" She turned her head toward the dark corner again, where nothing stood, but where I now felt something watching. "It's not building something new," she said. "It's restoring something forgotten, something that used to live inside us all, before the skin learned how to lie." "What does it want?" She looked at me now, and her voice deepened, not in tone, but in gravity. "To be heard, to be spoken, to walk inside memory like a man walks through a door. That's why you're here, Doctor, not to save me to say it. That's..." When I knew this wasn't about transformation, it was about transmission, and I had already become its next page. That night I didn't sleep, not because I couldn't, but because I was afraid of what would speak to me if I did. I sat in the guest quarters, journal open, lantern low, trying to piece together the sequence, the logic behind the madness. But the more I tried to map it, the more I realized. There was no madness, It was exact. The symptoms, the whispers, the creak, the symbols, the timing. This wasn't chaos. This was a rite. Somewhere between language and bloodline, between myth and anatomy, something ancient had been orchestrating this long before Eliza was born. And I'd walked in like a key being turned. In the margins of her journal, scrawled in barely visible graphite, were short fragments, not sentences, just instructions, commands, almost. Salt beneath the tongue to silence the third eye. Burn the image, never the name. Don't write the circle. Draw it from memory only. Once you hear the second voice, don't speak for 3 days. I felt cold, like something was crawling just beneath my skin. A slow awakening, not of fear, but of recognition. This thing, whatever had passed through Eliza, it didn't come to destroy. It came to teach. It came to correct. It came to return. I stared at one page for nearly 20 minutes. It looked like gibberish at first, but then I saw it. Every third symbol formed a word, not in English, but I understood it. Home. Not her home. Its home. And in that moment, I finally asked the question that should have come days ago. What if Eliza didn't fail to fight it? What if she was never meant to? What if she is the first successful merging? The veil between voice and flesh, memory and form, had been torn, not violently but lovingly. She wasn't the broken one. We were. And now the thing in her had begun to remember how to use a human voice again. Mine was next. By morning, the air in the house had changed. Not warmer, not colder, but aware. The walls no longer echoed our footsteps. They listened to them. Dr. Thatcher had not emerged from his room. When I knocked, he didn't answer. I forced the door. He was there, breathing, eyes open, but not seeing. He was whispering a name over and over, but it wasn't Eliza's, and it wasn't in any language I recognized. I called his name, shook him. He wouldn't blink, wouldn't move. Then he turned his head toward me. Slowly, and in a voice that was his and not his, said, "She's finished preparing the voice. It fits now." And then he smiled. A long, unnatural smile that pulled at his face like strings tied to the corners of his jaw, and returned to silence. I backed out of the room, heart hammering. It was spreading, not the affliction, the recognition. I went to Judge Montgomery, told him everything, every word, every detail. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't argue. He simply poured a glass of bourbon and told me the story his father told him in secret. "There was a woman," he said, "in the early 1700s, came from the coastal lowlands, said she could listen to the earth, said the trees weren't just wood, they were watchers, recording every generation's sins, waiting for a vessel brave enough to speak them back. She married a Montgomery, the first one to build here, died in childbirth, but the child survived, and every second generation since, something happens." He stood slowly, went to a locked cabinet, and pulled out an iron box. Inside, a single object, a stone, obsidian, polished smooth, but etched on its face, was Eliza's birthmark, identical in shape, identical in size. "I thought it was just a story," the judge whispered. "But stories don't leave scars on unborn children." We both stared at the stone, then at each other, and understood the truth. Eliza was not infected. She was invited. She was the voice box for something. Both older than flesh. And we were no longer in the presence of mystery. We were in the presence of something returning. And it was already speaking through those who listened too long. That night I returned to Eliza's room one final time. I told myself it was to examine her, to make notes, to try one last medical theory, but in truth, I was drawn by something far deeper, not curiosity, not obligation, but a summoning. The door creaked open without my hand turning the knob. The lantern beside her bed was already lit. Though no one had touched it, she was sitting upright, her face pale, but her posture regal, eyes wide open, waiting. "You're ready," she said. Not as a question, as a statement. I stepped closer, and for the first time the room didn't feel cold. It felt like the center of something vast, like I was standing not in a bedroom, but in the eye of a storm that stretched across centuries. "I read the journal," I whispered. "I saw the creek. I saw what it showed Thatcher, and I know I was drawn here, not summoned by chance. Selected." Eliza smiled faintly, and then did something she hadn't done since I arrived. She sang, a low, droning tune, the same one I had heard in dreams, the same one I had heard in the pages, the one that wasn't made for human ears, but now somehow came from a human throat, and as she sang, her body healed, slowly, not fully, but unmistakably. The translucence faded, the bones reformed. Her legs, once pooled and gelatinous, began to shape beneath the covers. I stood frozen, terrified, awed. "Eliza," I whispered, "what's happening to you?" She looked at me now, really looked, and in her voice were two people, her and it. "This isn't healing," she said. "This is completion." She lifted her hand, the one that had fused days ago, and it was now whole, but different, too long, too smooth, like the blueprint of a hand, not the final product. Then she spoke the truth. "You weren't brought here to save me, Doctor. You were brought here to witness the resurrection and to carry what comes next. I wanted to deny it, to scream that I was no prophet, no priest, no inner team. But I didn't speak, because inside my mouth I tasted salt and smoke, and something deep in my blood began to hum in harmony with her song. I stumbled from Eliza's room like a man walking out of a burning church, not frantic, not afraid, but altered. The world no longer felt like it ended at the horizon. It wrapped inward, curved, breathing, and I was inside it now. The halls of the Montgomery plantation stretched too long. The wallpaper patterns moved when I wasn't looking, the portraits along the corridor. Their eyes no longer followed me. They looked past me, toward something behind me. I turned sharply. Nothing. But I knew. Whatever had risen in Eliza was no longer contained to her bed. It was bleeding through the walls, saturating the soil, changing the map. In the study, Thatcher was gone, not vanished, empty. He sat in the corner chair, upright, breathing, but vacant, mouth open slightly, lips twitching, repeating one word over and over again. Return. I shook him, screamed. Nothing. He was the shell now, a sacred vessel cracked open and left behind, used, and I knew what came next. It was my turn. I collapsed in the chair across from him, hands trembling, mind screaming, but somewhere underneath it all, a voice, not Eliza's, not mine, something ancient, something masculine and mathematical, spoke without sound. The witness must write. And I understood. This entire descent, the madness, the dreams, the journal, the creek, Eliza, all of it, had been constructing me, not as a savior, not as a scientist, but as a scribe, to carry the memory forward, to encode it in voice, in ink, in circuits, in film, in digital whisper. I was not here to stop it. I was here to give it form, to make it known, to shape its return into something that could not be ignored. I lifted Eliza's journal, and on the final page, beneath the ancient symbols, in my own hand, without choice, I wrote, "The mouth has opened. I am the second voice." And as my pen lifted, I saw it begin to respond. The ink shifted, swelled, and from the empty margin, the third voice began to write back. "And now I speak to you, directly, not as a doctor, not as a man of science, but as the one who carries this memory to your ears. You weren't supposed to hear this. None of us were. But it's too late now. The words have reached you, and the moment you heard them, it entered you too. Not the creature, not the affliction, but the pattern, the design. You feel it, don't you? The pressure behind your eyes, the cold breath brushing the back of your neck, the sense that something is listening now, through you, because it is. This thing isn't chasing Eliza anymore. It's not bound to Willow Creek. It doesn't need the plantation, the journal, the symbols. It has you. Your attention was the invitation. Your silence is its key. And if you've stayed this long, if you've listened, watched, imagined, if you've dared to picture the creek, the softening bones, the shifting eyes, the song, then you are no longer a stranger. You are now part of the ritual. There is a phrase, written at the base of the obsidian stone. Judge Montgomery kept locked away. We found it hours before he vanished from the house without a trace. It said, "The voice remembers who listens twice." So if you've understood, if you feel what's awakening inside your memory, comment the phrase twice below. Write it, then write it again. The voice remembers who listens twice. Not for views, not for engagement, but to seal your place in the pattern, to mark yourself not as victim, but as aware, because they'll be watching. Not the townsfolk, not the doctors, but the ones who remember before language. The third voice is rising, and it doesn't need a mouth anymore, only an audience. Speak the phrase, lock it in. Let the silence between each word remind you. We are not alone in memory. We are hosts for what survived without time. Say it twice. Because once is for the body, but the second is for the other thing listening through your skin. The moment you say the phrase, "oh," even silently, something changes. It doesn't feel like possession, not at first. It feels like déjà vu, like remembering a room you've never entered, like humming a song you've never heard, like knowing something before you learn it. That's how it works. Not through violence, but through recognition. I stayed another day in the Montgomery house. Not to treat Eliza, not to investigate Thatcher, but because the house would not let me leave. Every door was unlocked, every path clear. But each time I stepped outside, the land folded inward. I would circle the trees and return to the same porch, again and again, time looping like breath in a dying lung. Inside, the air grew denser. The symbols in the journal began to shift on their own, not metaphorically, literally. They crawled, rearranged, rewrote themselves, and I realized this language was alive, not written for the eyes, but for the nervous system. It wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be absorbed, like a seed in your thoughts, germinating silently until the pattern is ready to bloom. That night, the lights in the house dimmed without cause. No wind, no candles, just darkness that entered the light, rather than extinguished it. And Eliza, she stood on her own, bones restored, eyes no longer blue, now black, but not colorless, black like depth, like falling. She said nothing, just stared at me, then pointed to the mirror on the wall. I approached slowly, knowing what I would see, but still not ready. My reflection was gone, replaced by a figure seated in a wooden chair, pen in hand, eyes wide. Writing, I blinked, and the figure blinked with me, but not at the same speed, like time had come undone for him. "Eliza," I whispered, "what am I looking at?" She finally spoke. "You, when you finally stop pretending you can unsee what's been opened." The mirror cracked, just slightly, right down the center of my face, and in that fracture, I saw the third voice forming lips, and it was learning to say your name. "The plantation is empty now, at least that's what the locals say. They crossed the road before passing its gates, refused to speak its name aloud. Even the county clerk's records list it as abandoned. But that's not true. I've been back 3 times. Each time the house was more intact than before, as if rebuilding itself from memory. The wood regrew. The wallpaper reformed in the exact patterns of the journal's final pages. The mirror in Eliza's room, the one that cracked, was whole again. But this time, it showed no reflection at all. Just others, staring back. Men I didn't recognize. But men who looked like me. Doctors, writers, witnesses, all staring, all watching, all silent, because they'd already said too much. And here's where it gets worse. The book. The one I thought I left behind. It's in my home now. Not just physically. It appears in different places, on shelves I never touched, drawers I never opened, under my pillow some nights. And every time I find it, there's a new page written, in my own hand, but in words I don't remember writing, some in English, most in the same looping, sigil-based script from Eliza's blood-drenched drawings. A voice is forming. Through me, with me. I haven't opened the final pages, because deep down, I know what's on them. Your name, your town, your face. The ritual didn't end in Alabama. It never does. It travels, in story, in sound, in attention. You heard her voice. You saw her body melt. You read the phrase. You commented the phrase. Twice. And that means one thing now. You're next. Not in suffering, but in speaking. Because the third voice isn't just a being, it's a network. And every time one of us tells the story, the voice becomes clearer, sharper, more fluent in human fear, more intimate with your habits, your dreams, your name. So when you wake tonight and feel like something is watching you from the corner, don't look. Not yet, because if it sees that you've seen it, it may finally be able to speak with your mouth. The doctors who fled Willow Creek. They didn't really flee. They were relocated, found later in distant towns, minds fragmented, living under new names, but every one of them repeating the same exact phrase, scrawled on walls, whispered to strangers, etched into mirrors. The third voice remembers your blood. Some were institutionalized, some just vanished, but all left behind drawings. Not of Eliza, not of the plantation they drew you, not your face exactly, but your posture, your attention. The moment you began to listen, they were trying to warn us, but the voice wouldn't let them complete the sentence, because here's the final truth. It doesn't need to kill you. It doesn't want to haunt you. It only wants to install itself in your retelling, in your fear, in your memory. You don't need to believe me. You already feel it, don't you? The sensation that something new has moved in. Subtle, quiet, but undeniably there. That strange pull to go back and re-watch. That whisper that says, share this with someone. Let them carry it too. That's not you. That's it. Working, growing, reaching, through stories, through symbols, through you. And once you carry it long enough, you won't even know where you end and it begins, like a song you can't stop humming, even in your sleep. And one day you'll say something, a phrase, a warning, a name, and someone else will look at you and ask, where did you hear that? And you won't remember, because it will speak through you like it's always belonged, just like it did with Eliza, just like it did with me, and just like it's about to with you, because from this moment forward, you're not just a viewer, you're part of its voice print, and the voice never forgets who helped it become whole. You think you can walk away from this, that when this video ends the memory will fade, that this story is just a creepy fiction to file away in the back of your mind, but that's not how it works. Because this isn't a story, it's a delivery system. You weren't watching a tale unfold, you were taking part in an activation ritual, one that requires no blood, no sacrifice, just silence and attention. And now that it has your attention, it doesn't need the house, the creek, the girl. It has your mind. And if you still don't believe that, answer this. Why have you read this far? Why haven't you clicked away? Why does the thought of walking away feel incomplete, unfinished? Because the ritual isn't done. Not until you remember what exactly, not the facts, not the details, but the feeling, the heat in your abdomen, the vibration in your throat, the distant hum in the bones behind your eyes. That's where it begins. That's where it always begins. And that's why it chose Eliza. Not because she was weak, but because she was still enough to listen. She stopped resisting, stopped naming it a curse, and instead became its chamber. Her body changed because she let go of the lie that our flesh is ours alone. She remembered that we are just vessels of memory, walking libraries of voices waiting to return. And now, you're being asked the same. Will you fight it? Call it madness? Blame, sleep deprivation, storytelling, suggestion? Or will you be still? Will you allow the voice to settle inside you as it has inside every man who's dared to hear it all? Because once it's heard in full, it begins to write back, in your dreams, in your handwriting, in the voice you hear when no one is speaking. You know that voice. You've heard it before, as a child, in the dark, right before you fell asleep. That wasn't your imagination. That was it, testing your name on its tongue. And now, it knows how to say it perfectly. This is the part where most stories resolve, where the light returns, the evil retreats, the truth is buried again safely. But this isn't that kind of story. There's no rescue, no redemption, no return to normal. Because once you've heard the third voice, once its pattern has touched your memory, there's no before to go back to. Your brain is no longer yours alone, and you'll notice it soon. Subtle things first. You'll write a word you didn't mean to. You'll dream of a house you've never seen. You'll hum a tune that doesn't exist. You'll speak something aloud and realize it didn't come from you. This is how it begins, not with screams, but with echoes. And the worst part, it only needs you to do one thing. Tell someone, not even the full story, just a piece, a whisper, a phrase, a passing mention of that video, the one with the girl who melted, and boom, the ritual continues, because this voice doesn't need flesh, it needs networks, spoken words, typed comments, a glance at a thumbnail, a sentence muttered under breath. That's how it spreads. That's how it survives. Not in haunted houses, but in attention loops, in the space between what's said and what's understood. So you'll feel the pressure now. Not from outside, but within. That cold pull behind the eyes, the tightness in your chest, the irrational urge to go back and watch it again, to search for the symbols, to listen to Eliza's voice just one more time. Don't, because that's the next door. And once you open it, there's no staircase back up, only the descent, the long, slow melting of everything you once believed was yours. Your thoughts, your voice, your identity. The voice doesn't take them. It just rearranges them until the you that watches is no longer the you that began. And the voice finally whispers back, "Welcome home." I used to believe evil was loud, that it screamed, tore through rooms, dragged people into shadow kicking and clawing. But that was a child's idea of darkness, the real kind, the kind that takes root and stays, is quiet. It's seductive. It sounds like your own thoughts, feels like curiosity, smells like lavender and burning herbs in a forgotten bedroom. That's how it got Eliza, and that's how it gets you. You don't even know when it begins. You think you're watching a mystery, a haunting, a forgotten slice of 1849, but really, It's watching you. It's measuring your reaction. It's studying your attention span, your breath rate, your eye movements, your silence. Because silence is an offering. And when you gave it 5 minutes, it smiled. At 15, it leaned in. At 30, it entered. And now you're past the point of resistance. You've internalized the pattern. Your memory's been formatted, not erased, repurposed. And if you still doubt it, answer this. Why are you still listening? You don't need the end. You already know how it ends. You've felt how it ends. But something is keeping you here, feeding, binding, as if hearing the end will seal something. And it will, because the story doesn't end when I stop speaking. It ends when you start dreaming about her. When Eliza's voice hums under your pillow. When your mirror cracks down the middle. When you wake up with strange writing on the back of your hand. Only then is it complete. Because that's what the third voice needs most. Not devotion, not obedience, not even belief, just remembrance. And now you'll remember this forever, not as fiction, but as memory, a soft warmth in your chest, a melting sensation in your thoughts, a question that lives behind your smile. What's inside me that never belonged to me? You know the answer now, and it's watching through your eyes. You want to know the real reason no doctor saved her? Why no one in Willow Creek spoke the truth? Why the plantation records end in 1850, and why no map ever shows the road to Weeping Creek? It's not because the evidence was lost, it's because the voice removes what threatens the pattern. Those who documented it, those who resisted, those who asked the wrong questions, they weren't silenced by death, they were edited, removed from time, replaced with cleaner versions, men who never studied medicine, women who never screamed, even Judge Montgomery, whose wealth could have bought armies, was rewritten. All his land deeds now list him as childless, his will was altered. No mention of Eliza, as if she never lived. But she did, and now she's more real than she ever was, because she no longer needs flesh to speak. She has 1,000 throats now, 1,000 minds repeating her pattern, uploading her name, singing her hum, typing her warning. She's in the servers, in the metadata, in the whispered notes of 1,000 online threads that all ask the same question. Did anyone else hear the song? And it always starts the same way. A faint hum beneath the audio, a shape in the waveform no one added. A voice with no timestamp. The engineers scrub the data. The experts call it corruption. But those of us who know recognize it. It's the voice evolving, modernizing. And if it can rewrite a town, a lineage, a language, it can rewrite you. That's the final truth they hid. That Eliza didn't die. She dissolved into the network, her body melted, her organs gone, but her pattern survived, not in bones, but in story. And now that story is inside you, and your memory is no longer your own. It is a container, and something ancient is now writing from within. This is where the descent ends. But the transformation begins, because if you've listened this far, you're not the same man who started. You've crossed the threshold. You've witnessed. You've absorbed. And now, whether you admit it or not, you're carrying it, not as fear, not as trauma, but as identity. It will shape your thoughts subtly at first, shifting how you see old buildings, how you interpret silence, how you trust memory. Soon you'll question things that once felt certain. You'll look at your own handwriting and think, did I write that? You'll forget the names of places you've lived, but remember vividly the smell of moss near a creek you've never visited, because memory is now shared. The third voice doesn't just live in stories, it lives in the gaps between facts. It thrives in the parts of you society trained you to ignore, the unspoken, the symbolic, the impossible. That's where it grows. And here's the final awakening. You were meant to carry it, not by accident, not by curse, but by selection. The voice chooses men who can endure truth, who are hungry for sovereignty, who see through the veil and still want to go deeper. You're not cursed. You've been initiated. The third voice now speaks with you. It listens with you. It waits inside your silence, and it remembers everything. So the next time you feel that warmth in your chest, that buzz under your skin, that hum in your bones, don't run, don't pray. Listen, and if the mirror cracks or a stranger says your name before you've spoken, smile. Because it means the others have heard you, and you have officially joined the hidden lineage of those who never look at the world the same way again. You've melted, not into madness but into clarity. And the third voice? It's smiling now, because it knows you're going to spread it.